Hello, my name is Judy Zorn, and welcome again to Tuesday Talks. Our special guest this week is Tony Manfredonia. Hi, Tony.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. And
Of course.
Tony may or may not be a name and or a face that is familiar to some of you. Tony has been a wonderful volunteer for several of our orchestral concerts and things like that. And Tony has a deep love for music, and we're going to explore a little bit about that today. And I want all of you to know who he is and the wonderful talent that he has. So Tony lives in Charlevoix currently, and is the music director of St. Mary's Catholic Church in Charlevoix, correct? So let's go back a little bit further. Tony, I think that you were born and raised in Philly.
Yes.
And you come from a musical family, particularly your mother. So maybe you could share a little bit about that with us.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So my mom, much like what I do now, I've been the music director at St. Mary's for about 3 years now, and she's been a music director at a plethora of churches since before I was even born, probably for 30 some years now. And I just kind of grew up with, she was always running choir practices, always playing the organ for a church. Literally I'd be, on Sundays or just kind of sitting behind the organ. And then eventually, as I got old enough, helping her out with some of the music, whether, singing a little bit in her choir and her children's choir, that sort of thing. And aside from that, she played piano for musicals. She was sort of there's a little network of, she was kind of the on-call keyboardist for like, okay, if so-and-so high school needs, keyboard 2 for, Hello Dolly or whatever, like she would sort of be the on-call kind of pianist for this little network of people up in Northeast Philadelphia. And so I just kind of grew up with a wide array of music, from liturgical to more classical, Bach, to even a little bit more modern in terms of like 21st century new music as well, from performing pianist and all sorts of stuff. So it was really my mom's influence that kind of got me hooked on just a wide style of music, from classical to show tunes to film scores, all of the above.
Was she your first piano teacher then?
She was my only piano teacher until college, and then my vocal, then my vocal training took off in college, aside from my writing. So yeah, she was my first and only piano teacher throughout my childhood up to when I was about 18, I guess.
So you're a graduate of Tempe and in Philly, and your degree is in music composition. So how and when did you get that call or that little knock that said, wow, this is what I have to do and this is what I love to do?
Yeah, that's a fun story. So I didn't really start writing music, like formally writing music, putting notes on a page, until I was about 16 years old. However, backtrack about 10 years from then, and growing up as a kid, my siblings and I would, have little Casio keyboards and just kind of make stuff up and like pretend we were making radio shows, press the little cassette tape record and stuff. So we would always do creative stuff like that. But it was when I was really taking charge of my own piano and singing that, I would be covering all this music, whether, again, musicals, rock bands, even classical pieces and stuff. I was always singing and covering and performing other people's music. But then a friend of mine at the time said, hey, you really should try writing your own stuff. And I said, you're nuts, but I'm going to try it anyway. Tried it, and it was just like a snowball effect from there. Like piece after piece, song after song, really took hold very much as a singer-songwriter at first, with more kind of rock-like styles, until I kind of started toying with, my mom's style, the classical stuff, and then really fell in love with that. And then moving into my first year at Temple University, where I was accepted for music composition, was when I really, really deeply fell in love with just all, just from the 18th century to 21st century kind of concert music and writing in that style, string quartets, orchestra pieces, you name it. I was always just churning stuff out, to the point where, like, I remember it was my sophomore year composition jury. They said, maybe next semester you shouldn't bring as many pieces to your composition jury. I was just churning stuff out left and right. It was just I
So
couldn't stop.
I'm going to stop you for a minute because I
Yeah.
think we all want to know a little bit. Can you even define the process for us? Do you start with a mood, with a theme, with some text in your mind, or do you start with a melody that you wake up in the middle of the night? I'm picturing this, okay, Tony, and a melody comes to your mind, and then you figure out, okay, it's going to be more in a classical bend, or it's going to be gaming music, or it's going to be how do you zero in on your compositions and what you're doing?
Right. So these days, I mean, now that I've been doing it sort of professionally for the past, 4 years or so, these days it's almost always there's a commission involved, right? So there's some, whether it's a game developer, whether it's a band director, an orchestra director, they're the ones saying, this is sort of the overall thing we want, whether it's commemorating something or they want it to sort of be in memoriam for whomever, whatever the overarching sort of commission is. That's usually the starting point, because that will give me sort of a theme, a mood. You brought up mood, and that'll give me a mood in mind, right? Even for indie films or YouTube intros, whatever it is, right? There's always a mood that I need to match, and then at that point, it's almost always melody or texture, right? So if it's meant to be something more ambient and not a lot of motion, then I'll think color, I'll think texture, right? If it's something that is meant to be melodic, if it's something that's meant to be kind of memorable in terms of melody and sort of can the people hum it back when they leave the concert hall, then it's melody. That's usually the starting point. And then from there, it's, just filling in gaps with harmony and bass lines and all the other elements that make up a piece, right? But there's those two starting elements of melody and texture, and then everything kind of falls from there.
Right. So you graduate from the university and you have met a wonderful gal who is
Yes.
raised in Harbor Springs. And lo and behold, both of you settle here, and that's what brought you back to this area in Charlevoix. And of course, you have these deep roots with liturgical church music from growing up and from your mom. And so you are kind of balancing two worlds of your so expressive compositions and composing along with the church music that you do and do so well at St. Mary's. So how does all that work together, Tony?
Oh man, it's sometimes it can be hard. Sometimes it can be quite a juggling act, but I don't know if there's many young musicians who say otherwise, So what's a beautiful thing is that, my wife and I share the same faith, right? So like that was really our connecting point. That was really how, when we met online, when I was still in school, that was really what brought us together, sort of a share in morality and a share in faith. And it was such a crazy turn of events. When I first moved here, I was actually working, I was still doing the music writing and doing smaller things at that time. But also working at like an iPhone repair shop in Petoskey when it was still there. But then I was subbing, right? I was subbing for the previous music director at St. Mary's here and there, and got to know the pastor there, and then eventually got hired. So that was about 3 years ago. I got hired to do that. So it is a juggling act of, here are like my St. Mary's days, right? Here are the days where I am devoted to taking care of stuff here. And then here are my days where I'm devoted to writing music. And then I have like maybe one day every other week where I'm like doing more admin work, kind of, contracts and all that stuff. But I think what's most important is that everything at the end of the day, I have to make sure that I am present at home with my family, with my wife and her family and stuff. Like there has to be a wall of, okay, my work is done. Because as a musician, it can be very hard to separate, especially like creating music. It can be very hard to shut that off, right? It can be very hard to just say, okay, I'm done for the day. Now I'm home. So I think that has been something that I still have to work on. That has been something that I still struggle with here and there, where it's like, if I got a lot of commissions to take care of and Christmas is coming up or Easter's coming up and I have to do things there, it can be very hard to just, 6:30 dinner time. All right. Got to put that all at the door,
No, no, it's like the blood that's flowing through your veins, Tony. It's that the music and the artistic nature that you have is the fabric of who you are.
Right.
And it doesn't shut on and off like a water faucet,
No, no. It's very hard. Yeah, it takes a lot of, I even give myself like 10 minutes from the last note I put on the page to like when I walk through, kind of leave my office here and just like, okay, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes just to like not think about music, to just kind of center myself, because or else it'll just some new ideas,
Right.
Maybe if she's out with friends or something, maybe I'll like run over to the piano real quick, like fiddle around.
So you mentioned that you write commission pieces. So that
Yes.
means that somebody finds you. I'm sure you have a website or whatever, or word of mouth, and they call you up and say, "Hey, would you?" And you take a look at that. So a life of a composer is one of commissions. And so talk us through a little bit of that, but then also I would think that you try to find time to do some things that are important and meaningful to you, and that, that tune in your head that you would like to put down a week or two.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So yeah, you're right. It is very much one of two things, right? It's someone that I've gotten to know through just, whether it's attending concerts together or seeing their music, and eventually we just connect and become friends. Oh, I would say 90% of the work I get as a composer is from people who end up knowing me, right? Just from years of connection, from all the way back at college, right? Like just the years of just kind of getting to know each other, and then commissions will kind of fall through or come through that route of networking, right? The formal word of networking. Secondly, word of mouth, like you mentioned, where it's sort of a friend of a friend say, hey, I know this Tony guy, he writes some kind of fun game sounding music or just, real melodic stuff. I know you're looking for a piece. And then it just kind of becomes a mutual friend of a friend, or a connection that will then reach out to me. Sometimes I've only, I will say very seldom, I'll just get a random email that says, hey, we're looking for, in fact, just 2 days ago, someone said, we need something for our YouTube channel. Like, someone told me about you. And I was like, sure, okay. Don't know who you are, but, I'm happy to do this for you. But so yeah, it's a long marathon style process of getting to know people, and then kind of commissions coming from there. As for like music that I sort of just want to write, in fact, I just did this over the summer in a completely different style, right? I would say 9 times out of 10, the music I'm writing is very contrapuntal, melodic, kind of classically influenced. Even for my video game soundtracks, there's almost always this like kind of Bachian influence undertow, all of it.
And how much? Yeah.
Yeah. This past summer though, I did an album kind of more in like an alternative rock style, kind of more of a singer-songwriter type thing. Very much a passion project, something that's been on my mind, like I've wanted to do for years. And like you said, you get in this grind of constantly writing to pay the bills and to fulfill someone else's need. But eventually, like I was like, I am just dying to do something for the love of doing it, right? Like I was just dying to do that, which is where the album is called Rosewater. And I just released it a couple weeks ago. And it was something that really helped me reset and rejuvenate my creativity for all now the next few miles of commissioned projects.
Well, and we have some difficult holidays coming up, or difficult in the sense when you mix it with COVID. There's not the traditional looking, especially in the churches and with Thanksgiving, and Christmas, and all of that. So, about how many compositions have you written?
Oh boy. Many. I haven't counted. If you're factoring in like the commissioned ones, I would say between like commissioned pieces, probably between like 20 to 25 over the last like 3 or 4 years or so. And this is like all encompassing. This is like not just one style, but this is like encompassing sort of little random chamber pieces that local people needed, or random things like that. But overall, I would have to count. I wouldn't be able to tell you. Like I said, when I was in college, I was just churning stuff out. Things that had never been played, things that people had never even heard. I mean, I have a bunch of stuff that's just sitting on my hard drive that, maybe there'll be a use, maybe there won't. I don't know. So, yeah.
I know that you talked a lot about that a lot of your stuff has sort of this some form of a classical nature to it.
Right.
Classical background. Do you have do you have a favorite style to compose in, or a favorite, there, you talked about gaming music or band
Right.
music or string quartets, or is there something that, wow, I can't wait to get at this?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Anything that's large ensemble. So from orchestral, right, symphony orchestra to wind symphony, concert band. Even right now, my little screen here is I'm currently in the process of writing a piece for the Kalkaska schools. Craig Chissis, he's the director there. He commissioned me to do a piece for them. And so I'm working on that right now. So that's kind of great too. Concert band. I have a wind symphony piece for Texas, a fanfare for a school in Texas due later this year. So anything big. I'm a huge fan of doing big stuff. In fact, I find it actually easier to write the big, however many, instruments, ensembles, from large symphonies to kind of chamber orchestras, like anything that's kind of on the larger scale, I have an easier time doing than sort of like solo piano. And not that I can't do solo piano, but I just like having all the different colors and all the different textures you can kind of come up with. That's sort of I thrive on it. Right, I absolutely thrive on it. Even for my game soundtracks, anything that has a lot of instruments, I love it. Like I get so excited.
So do you say that the finished product, if you will, what you put out is a contemporary sounding, more like Charles Ives, or a little Copland, or a little more contrapuntal and like you were saying, Bach-y, Mozart,
Right.
or
Yeah, I would say it's a blend of like newer harmonies with the more concretely contrapuntal, almost like hymns, right? Almost very hymn-like. Almost again, Bach. I mean, I'm a huge fan. I studied 18th century counterpoint even after my counterpoint class. Like I'm a huge fan of counterpoint. So it's almost like this blend of, I guess for those watching who may know composers, like if you put Shostakovich with like late Shostakovich with like Bach and threw them into the same thing, that's kind of sort of stylistically where I land. Definitely some film music influence. Like people have often said, oh, that sounds like Danny Elfman, who did like a lot of the people who know like the Tim Burton, like Nightmare Before Christmas, like a lot of the Tim Burton films, Danny Elfman did the scores for those. So people have often compared me to Danny Elfman, saying like, it sounds like Danny Elfman. I'm like, I guess, sure. So definitely huge Bach influence, huge Shostakovich influence, and then a little bit of film scoring thrown into the mix.
that's great. That's great. It's just, you always have a smile on your face, don't you? Because you're doing something that you love so much to do.
Yeah.
And some of it is you're working in your studio by yourself, and then you have the flip side of it when you're back at St. Mary's and you're involved with the parish and the choir and working with singing. You mentioned that you are a singer too.
Yes. So yeah, I'm a baritone. I guess I'm kind of, for those in chorals, I'm usually like bass one, right? Like, so technically baritone.
Right.
So yeah, and in fact, this year, I mean, I haven't really seen my choir since March. We have had, and for, very obvious reasons, like just not much singing involved. Even myself for a while, now I can sing just myself, and I'm facing away from everybody. Like I'm kind of up in the choir loft and a microphone, and it's just me, myself, and I singing. But I certainly miss, and for any of my choir members watching this, I certainly miss sort of the not really the camaraderie, but just the connection, right? I miss connecting with other musicians, singers, even instrumentalists, right? There was 3 pieces last year, 3 concert band pieces I was going to do last year, and we still haven't done them. And it's just, I'm craving that connection of just rehearsing with other musicians. There's something so magical and something so special about that. It's one thing to write and to share it, but it's another thing to actually experience it and talk about it and work through it and rehearse and practice. Like, I miss it so much. And I'm sure many of you there at the orchestra do as well.
Have you composed anything for your church choir?
I have, yeah. So we did, last year I did an Ave Maria composed because technically the parish is St. Mary of the Assumption. So I did for the Feast of the Assumption, I did an Ave Maria that they sang. And that has since, I did an expanded version. There was the Traverse City St. Francis Xavier High School in Traverse City. That high school did the Ave Maria, and in fact, an organist in China, actually wants to do it as well. So it's been neat to write for so many different skill levels. I'm just really grateful for what I've been able to do over the last few years, both at St. Mary's and as a composer.
Well, that's wonderful. I am so thrilled that we could take some time together today, Tony, and that I could introduce you to maybe people out there that in our audience who have not seen you or certainly not heard your music, and that we have such a wonderful talent right here in Charlevoix, a young composer who we hope can be possibly doing something with the orchestras, and you have done things with certain orchestra members in the
Yeah.
past. So Tony, I wish you all the best,
Thank you.
and so glad that you're here and making wonderful music for so many people to enjoy, whether it's school kids or gaming music or concert bands or throughout the country. Really, you've got things
Right.
in Texas and all over. So I want to thank you for taking time to be with us today, and I want to thank all of you out there for joining us again today on Tuesday Talks. We are so appreciative that you are following this program with us and that you are supportive of the Great Lakes Chamber Orchestra. We are your orchestra, and we look forward to the day soon, I hope, when we can be back together with a live performance. We all, yes, thank you, Tony. As Tony mentioned earlier, our hearts are aching. We are just so looking forward to hearing live music again. So thank you so much for all the support that you give to the orchestra. And Tony, thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you. The honor was all mine.